We're obsessed with the legacy media. Still. Wait, what? Why do we rely on the same sources, even though trust is at an all-time low? It's because of this one disturbing thing. So it took me a little extra time to get this video put out because new studio setup, new camera, all that. But here's some crazy numbers for you. From major media research outlets, 79% of people 16 years old up to 40 years old say they get daily news. And an entire third of those actually pay for their news through subscriptions. What? But here's the real twist. What if the answer to why is actually a lot deeper than habit or convenience? What if it's totally woven into how we're taught to view authority and trusted sources? So today we're exploring the one most disturbing way that our childhood experiences and our culture keep us coming back to these same trusted sources, and how it's really not your fault, except it kind of is because of this one thing. So what's really going on? What's up, dudes? Welcome back to the Sunrise Lounge here. We're working on being as unbiased as possible. And in today's postmodern culture that's flooded with opinions, agendas, and fast-moving trends, being unbiased is a challenge. But if you're here, you're not here for a flash of stimulation. You actually want to click into a video and think. So pull up your hood. Let's get to work. So why are so many of us obsessed with the legacy media, even though we're aware of bias and narrative control? I mean, we're obsessed with it. Well, it's not an accident. So how did we get here? How did we get so attached to media sources that often don't serve us objectively? Now, if you're being tempted to look away or ignore this because you're the one that doesn't trust the mainstream media, hang tight, because this one thing says otherwise. Question is, are you open-minded enough to consider it? But that is like final boss level. So before we get there, we have to go back to level one. When we were kids. You see, ever since we were kids, even before then, the legacy media, that massive production, big budget story machine, has always been the standard of information. I mean, think about it. Even as late as the COVID-19 pandemic, people were ruthlessly shamed for doing their own research instead of trusting the experts. I mean, how dare someone use some intellectual agency and search the internet of the local library for information? Psst, hey, by the end of this episode, you'll know why that anti-skepticism was an impulsive and subconscious response. Also, if a proclivity for doing your own research or visiting your library makes you some fringe antisocial agent, I guess I'm antisocial. I mean, I am recording this in a closed basement, so. Now you, like me, probably weren't in the first grade also locked into broadcast news, but do you remember what the one thing was we were all doing when we were kids? We were going to school. A quick sidebar here, the whole public versus private school thing in this context, it literally doesn't matter, like at all. The K-12 format is what matters in this context. So why? It all goes back to how the system was established in the first place, and it's all because of a dude named Horace and a country that doesn't exist anymore. And this goes way back, way back. And I'm going to tell you why in less than 60 seconds. I'm going to bring my notes here. Okay, is that cheap? Nice. Why? We'll go for it. Here we go. So Horace took a trip overseas to good old Prussia with a P, Prussia, which is now Germany. So good old Horace, when he got to Prussia, discovered that there was a state-run school system that was structured around three individual things: uniformity, discipline, and curriculum. And in this case, curriculum means like universal information standards. So man was convinced that this model would help create that ideal educated civic population in the United States. And that goes right back to the values expressed in so many founding documents like the Northwest Ordinance about the crucial importance of education to our political system functioning. So when the H-Man gets back, he passionately advocates for this system. And so good old Massachusetts actually establishes the first state board of education in 1837. And that, lads and ladies, is the foundation of the American K-12 system in less than 60 seconds. Wow. Now, this is why this has to do with the obsession that we have with the corporate legacy media. First off, what ends up happening over the next 150 years in the American education system is that the focus becomes increasingly on the two factors in the Prussian system that are uniformity and discipline. And I mean, for fair reason too, because it was literally the Wild West in America in their education system in the early days. I mean, the closest we got to standardized and structured was college, and that was for rich people. I mean, no one's going to college. I'm not going to college. You go to college. So DeLorean all the way back to when we were kids, and you've got a standardized education system for sure. Interestingly, what's going on in the American higher education system is that students are paying small fortunes for it, and they're being told to be desperate to be a part of it. And it's a big factor for this media obsession, but more on that in just a minute. The U.S. education system, specifically the K through 12 format, is a super structured and uniform system, and it focuses on three key things: mechanical memorization, rule following, and standardizing test results. And of course, that all produces funding for the schools. The system teaches students to focus on the right answer instead of questioning, debating, exploring, or making an academic inquiry, which is funny because in the old American university system, a lot of coursework, especially intro to whatever, intro to psych, intro to chemistry, whatever, a lot of those were called inquiry into insert your subject matter. Interesting side note. So this whole system that focuses on getting the right answer, that conditions a reliance on approved sources of information. And the whole model suppresses curiosity and critical thinking and creativity, and that creates adults who are habitually tied to relying on narratives from familiar authoritative sources. It creates a docile, accepting, non-questioning population that's not only accepting, but is addicted to being fed information that it can then consume with minimal effort instead of putting in effort to analyze and critically think about. And that is that is not what we're about here in the Sunrise Lounge. Now, like I said, this system does not stop with the K through 12 system. So how is it further reinforced in the university system? What does it have to do with all of it? See, I promised we would get there. Okay. Think way back to the intro of this video, back when we were so much younger, and I threw some numbers at you. Now, here's some numbers that are even more shocking. 5 to 1, 10 to 1, and 20 to 1.
Wow.
According to legit sources like the National Association of Scholars and the Higher Education Research Institute, these ratios describe the liberal to conservative ratio among faculty at public and private universities in America. 20 to 1. Like, how? I mean, you might as well just say high, super high, and what the f***? Now, I've been working in higher education for a long time, since 2015, and it took me a long time to get a bachelor's degree for so many different reasons. It took me 7.5 years to get a 4-year bachelor's degree, 5 major changes, spent 6 days in political science, just 6 days. So I got to experience a lot of different faculty from a lot of different departments. And now working in higher education, and man, I'll tell you, this past year when my university deleted its Office of Institutional Diversity, all of its DEI programs, and dissolved them and put them in other places, the absolute meltdown seemed like it was universal across campus. Like everyone was upset, but then not a single person thought, yeah, this is a good idea, or at least acted like it publicly. So I've got a lot of experience in the higher education ecosystem. So when you see numbers like that, they feel like they make sense. It feels like that tracks. Look, the biggest of these ratios, the what the ratio, that's in the humanities and social sciences. Yeah, big shocker. I know. Do I tell them to hit the like button now? It's fine. Right now. No, it's good. So this super high left to right ratio among college professors leads to 2 specific factors that we're talking about today. And those factors lead to one specific outcome. Let me ask you this. Who sits on hiring committees? Who sits on tenure approval boards? Who approves or guides research proposals and idea generation? Well, if you math properly, answer's super clear. Leftist faculty. So you have a cycle that refreshes itself with leftist ideologies for the most part because leftists are educating, training, and then hiring leftists. So the first factor is that this liberal to conservative ratio among faculty impacts what gets taught on a grand scale, but especially in the humanities and social sciences. So then leftist ideology dominance leads to one-sided views of history, politics, culture issues, and that leads to being conditioned to accepting a specific narrative or viewpoint about narratives. And it can be super subtle, which is why it's so insidious. The grammar police are gonna blow up my door for doubling up. Now, the second factor, a student's exposure to one-sided views builds their tendency to trust in and then rely on certain media narratives and the sources that they get them from. So one specific outcome of this all leads back to is crystallizing a reliance on being told what to think. So we've crafted a preference for legacy media outlets that reflect similar worldviews, which then reinforces the influence of those outlets on us, on our culture, on society. And don't make the mistake of thinking conservative media is immune to the information loop. This good guy versus bad guy aura of conservative channels that carefully nurture a moral superiority complex creates its own echo chamber. So you can see how this obsession with legacy media starts to embed itself. So now we know the problem. Where do we go from here? Well, it's the thing you've been waiting for. And it's the answer to how it's our fault. We're comfortable with authority. In fact, we crave it. We need it. And based on very long-standing sociological and psychological research that seems to stem from our mental development as a species, where over time we've learned to trust authority because it provides security. I mean, since we're getting all sciencey, we can actually copy paste concepts from physics. All things in nature tend towards decay or rest. It's a concrete law of thermodynamics. A thermo what now? That law includes our mindset. We don't want to be kinetic. We want to be at rest. See, it's in our very human nature to be comfortable with authority, especially when it comes to information consumption. Now, there's two problematic little psychology terms that, why are these always so true? Why? Confirmation bias and authority bias. Confirmation bias is when we focus on information that supports what we already believe and ignore anything that contradicts it. Instead of being open to new perspectives, we naturally filter things to fit our existing views, even if that means overlooking the full picture. It's like cherry picking facts to confirm what we already think is true. It's something our brains do to make us feel more certain, even if it keeps us from seeing things objectively. And the second thing, authority bias. Authority bias is when we're more likely to believe what someone says just because they're in a position of authority. So instead of questioning information, we trust it more easily because of their credentials or status. It's like giving more weight to someone's opinion just because they seem to know better, even if they may not actually be right. And all of this is something that I've synthesized into a concept called veracity bias. I mean, it's obviously an extremely novel concept. I mean, why even go to college when you can subscribe to the Sunrise Lounge? I don't know. Veracity bias is a concept that combines both confirmation bias and authority bias. Now, where the concept gets its jet fuel is it sits in the framework of our educational and cultural conditioning, both to rely on familiar authoritative sources and our tendency to consume instead of challenge information and narratives. Look, historically, propaganda, narrative control aren't anything new. I mean, look at examples like Joseph Stalin's Red Russia or Mao's People's Republic of China, Adolf's Germany. I mean, even us, the United States, the good guys, signed the Espionage and Sedition Acts into law in World War I to criminalize any anti-war speech because it interfered with the war effort. But media companies tend to exploit our veracity bias because of something called the halo effect. We're drawn to legacy media because of its tradition and familiarity. I mean, these are media brands that we grew up seeing in homes and barbershops and shopping malls, and that reinforced this perceived trustworthiness. They're recognizable, so we trust them. It's kind of like you clicking into this video from a startup channel that doesn't have thousands of views yet. You took a risk by clicking in because you're curious. You want to know things. But the most watched videos from channels you recognize that you see have tons of views, that familiarity creates an automatic sense of credibility. We need that level of security. And one of our deepest needs is to mitigate anarchy and chaos. Uncertainty is one of our biggest fears. And so something that presents itself as authoritative and it has a feeling of familiarity, whether we've been educated into conceptual familiarity or there's this recognizability starting from all the way back in our childhoods, we have a subconscious tendency to live in the framework of this veracity bias. Now, a huge lingering question is, when you have widespread internet access, social media, and citizen journalism, and it starts colliding with concepts like fact-checking, misinformation, and intentionally non-factual takes, you end up with an extremely volatile media and cultural ecosystem. So is this level of media credibility still deserved in an era proven to have cracks in the media system? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore in our next video. If you want to see where this conversation even started, check out this video next. Hit the like button if you liked it. If you hated it, tell me why in the comments. And most importantly, text this video's link to someone you know. And if the Sunrise Lounge is for you, a subscription is free and super appreciated. So that's a crisp salute and a firm handshake. We publish videos generally every 2 weeks, but we're done and dusted for now. So always remember, pull up your hood, stay smart, and I will see you on the next one.